Hello again. Now let's go back to our top story this afternoon. The latest unemployment numbers painting a grim picture. South Africa's unemployment rate rising to 35.3% in the fourth quarter of 2021. That's October to December, the highest since the start of the quarterly labour force survey in 2008. But the expanded unemployment rate, which includes discouraged work seekers who have given up looking for work, fell by 0.4 of a percentage point to 46.2%. Labour analyst and columnist Terry Bell joining me now this hour to unpack these numbers and the meaning of it all. Terry, good afternoon. A very grim picture, not good news at all.
And it's frightening, and I must admit I'm both worried and very, very angry. Because, I mean, these numbers should never have got to this stage. And you mentioned the expanded definition, but the expanded definition, the employment is defined as anyone who's done at least 1 hour of paid employment in a week. Now, there are many people who are regarded as employed who may have worked for 1 day in the week or a couple of days in a month, and they're regarded as employed. So if we look at the realistic idea of what it means to be unemployed, I mean, someone selling a few oranges on the street corner is not really employed. I'm saying I think we're looking at well over 50%, 55, maybe even 60%. And certainly in the youth category, 15 to 24, we have an extraordinary amount of unemployment. In some cases where surveys have been done, up to 80%. And you also have a situation, the reason I'm quite angry is among them, for example, are 58,000 early childhood development principals, teachers and other workers who were promised an employment relief package payment back in October 2020, have still not been paid. It's ridiculous. I mean, you also have a situation here where I live in Muizenberg in Cape Town. I went to the post office to discover a group of people who'd come to pick up that paltry 350 Rand unemployment package. The post office was closed without any notice. There was a handwritten notice on the door saying, "Go to retreat." I explained to them where retreat was, 7 kilometers away. I've now discovered that the retreat post office has now been closed. You know, this is the sort of thing that makes me exceptionally angry, especially when we see that former workers' trade unions from the Metal and Allied Workers Union, which became NUMSA Inokologwana, whom I knew from many years ago, who is now the finance minister, cutting corporate taxes down to 27%. In the old days, under the Amabulu, and under the apartheid regime, it was 48%. The money is there. The point is it's not being used. To keep calling Asina Mali and whatnot is nonsense. Yeah. It's been chowed, it's been corrupted. I'm really angry.
Do you think that the level of unemployment is indirectly a result of the austerity measures?
Partly, yes. It's the austerity measures really amount to what is government policy. Government policy has been a mess. For the simple reason, I mean, and the classic was the one I was mentioning about early childhood development. They didn't even know how many ECD centres there were. No one had ever done the work. The government has been so busy with its factual fighting and whatnot that nothing has actually been properly done. It's been ad hoc, knee-jerk reaction all the way through. That's part of the problem. But the overall thing is we should have looked at our situation and said, where do we go from here? We have corporate entities in this country, particularly in the minerals industry over a recent period, that have made record profits, yet we reduce the tax to them. In fact, by putting up the petrol price, which is not also a factor that comes in from overseas, of course, but what that's going to do is it's going to tax the poorest of the poor even more. So we're in a devil of a mess. How we get out of it is going to require, if it is possible, I don't believe that the present regime would possibly do it, or anyone else on the horizon at the moment. I don't know how they get out of it, but it will require really radical proposals. At the moment, it's opening up the way for all the charlatans and demagogues who are going to look for scapegoats. And once again, we're going to have, they may not use the term nkwenkwe, but that's what they're doing. It's xenophobia.
Now, the 7.9 million job seekers cannot find work. That's about 8 million people. But under this expanded definition that we use, or the Stats SA uses, you've got about 12.5 million people who are out of work. and you've got people who've just given up on looking for like formal employment. I mean, the horizon is bleak, as you say. What could assist in changing this? I mean, let alone the investigation into corruption. We've seen the state capture coming out. But what else do you think, Terry, could lead to an improvement in the fortunes and the prospects for the unemployed?
Let's look to the past. We had another situation, not quite as bad as this, quite honestly, the so-called Great Depression. We have a global ongoing recession, they keep calling it, but it's a global economic crisis. How did some people not get out of it, but at least manage it? And we looked at places like New Zealand was a classic example. What they did was the government set up a huge number of programs employing people, for example, planting trees. New Zealand now has one of the greatest forestry industries going. That's the sort of thing that you have to start thinking about if you're going to do it within the system. The state needs to take a lead in this, because the private enterprise is not going to do it. They're interested in making profits, and of course some of them have done very well. The point is, here in this system, the state now has to take a lead and do something about creating the situation of employment.
But the president has said it's not government's job to create jobs.
Well, if it's not government's job to create jobs, then I'm afraid he's going to fall flat on his face, because in the past, and this was something that Maynard Keynes, and I'm not a Keynesian, I would like to see a complete change of society. Keynes said, when a situation like this occurs, the state has to step in on behalf of the people. If it does pretend to represent the people. We don't have democracies, we just have hypocrisies that pretend to be democracies. But if they say they're serving the people, what they need to do is actually take steps, and that includes creating conditions for the private sector to create jobs, but also for the state to create the conditions and the jobs. We already have the what's it called, the EWP thing, which pays people next to nothing.
The expanded works program, yeah.
Yeah. What we need to do is go beyond that. Do something like getting people out there, building back the railway lines that have been stolen, that sort of thing. That's what we can do. Huge infrastructure projects that involve people on the ground, that make them feel that they have a stake in their community and in their society, rather than the fact that they've just been forgotten, and that they feel bitter and disillusioned with the powers that be, with the status quo, with the politicians, with everything, and even the Constitution, which in fact should be applied. If it was applied, we'd have no problem.
Thank you very much, Terry Bell, for some of your insights on these shocking latest stats, SA's unemployment figures for the last quarter of 2021, October to December. It is not looking good. Something big has to happen. You need some dramatic action that is enabled by the state, both, as he says, in creating the environment that's conducive for the private sector to create jobs, but government has to lead as well by example there with huge public initiatives of employment.